Hello, everybody, and yes, I'm sitting here with the name Sarah Dixon as well, but I'm Linda Robertson. So it's nice to see you all, especially as it's such a lovely evening. So let's get on, and then as soon as it's done, we can go home and sit in the garden, can't we? Okay, so a very warm welcome to the Summer Valley Forum. One thing I do want to do is remind you to keep the background noise to a minimum, please. Just speak one person at a time. I know I'm repeating something that you all know, I realize that. So if you can mute your microphones when you're not speaking, and then unmute when I invite you to speak, and indicate if you want to speak by using the chat facility. And then type in your name on the chat. Sarah said she's recording, and it will be placed on the council's YouTube channel, so people can view it afterwards if they wish to. And if you don't wish to appear, then you can turn off your video. Okay, so we have received apologies from Sally Davis, Councillor Sally Davis, and so on we go then. And I'll hand over to Sarah for item 2.
So we don't have a police representative this evening, unfortunately, but they have sent us a written update. So Alison's going to circulate that after the meeting with our normal follow-up for the meeting. But if anybody has any questions or anything that they wanted to pose to the police, could you put it in the chat and we can pick it up and follow up with the police after the meeting, if that's okay. So apologies, they did send their apologies, so we that they couldn't attend, but we can follow up any concerns or issues that you have. Just put it into the chat. Thank you.
Okay then, so item 3, which is an update on Ukraine, which I think again is Sarah's, yes, it's what she's doing all the time. So.
Okay, thanks, Linda. I've got a presentation, if it's okay, that I'd like to share with you. So hopefully that will come up on the screen now. Hopefully everyone is seeing that. Okay. So I firstly wanted to say a big thank you to our communities, actually, and to the sponsors. People have given so much time, resource and commitment to the Ukraine's guests coming over and staying in the UK. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to those people that are sponsors and businesses and community groups all rallying round together to provide support to our guests that are arriving. So a big thank you to those. I thought it'd be really useful to give a bit of an update in terms of what the council's responsibility is and what we're doing with our partners, and also to give you a bit of an idea of numbers of guests that are arriving in the area. So we've got a short little presentation, and do ask me any questions at the end. As a team, we are leading on the welfare support, so part of what, and I'll explain a little bit about what that means, but as a communities team we are taking part in the scheme and supporting people coming through. So you may be aware that there are 2 schemes in operation at the moment. One is the Homes for Ukraine sponsorship scheme, and there is a UK family visa scheme, and they're quite distinctive, different schemes that offer different levels of support. But anybody coming through any of those schemes, they will be able to access, as it says, to public services and benefits in the same way as anybody else living in the UK. So far at the moment, we have the Homes for Ukraine scheme is the scheme that the council has responsibility for in terms of a number of different criteria. We don't know the numbers locally for the Ukraine family visa scheme, so I've only got figures that relate to the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So the Homes for Ukraine scheme, currently we have 134 sponsors that are now registered, which has matched 300 guests, and that is across the whole of the district. We have currently 83 sponsor homes have received guests so far, and 179 guests have arrived. And if you see to the right of the slide, you'll see a breakdown by the forum areas, and you'll see that 22 of those 134 are based in the Somer Valley. So that's 22 homes that have been put forward, so sponsors and guests have been mapped. So it's quite a large number of people coming and settling in the Somer Valley. So the Homes for Ukraine scheme, the council, as I mentioned, has a duty to do a number of different things for that scheme to settle people in the area. We are required by the government to do a number of things. We are required to do accommodation checks for those sponsors that have put their properties forward to ensure that it's suitable for the proposed guests that they have matched with. We are also required to undertake DBS checks on anybody over 16 in the household. And we're also required to undertake some welfare checks and safeguarding checks to make sure there's no serious concerns or issues when they arrive at the property, so with the Ukrainian guests. And as an area, we decided that we would work very closely with our community wellbeing hub to join together to undertake the welfare checks so that we could easily make onward referrals to services such as Bath Mind for additional support around housing, and our advice with Citizens Advice Bureau, so that we can safely make referrals and work. We know we worked well together because we proved it through COVID. We've had 2 years of the hub being established and the partnership working, and we felt it was the best place for us to work again as a partnership and lead on the welfare checks for Ukrainian guests. As a council, we're also providing onward support in terms of supporting guests and sponsors to access services, help with accommodation issues and safeguarding issues. You will have heard in the press a lot about thank you payments from the government and money that government is allocating. This is only for the Homes for Ukraine scheme. It doesn't relate to the family support scheme. So this is where there is a big difference between the two. Guests receive £200 grant on their arrival, and that would be £200 per person. So if it's a family of 4, they would get £200 each, so £800. And the sponsors will receive a thank you payment, a monthly thank you payment, while their guests stay with them, and that's the £350 thank you payment, and that is a contribution towards their expenses. Welfare checks, as I mentioned, are delivered by us as a lead, the community's team leading on it, but working in partnership with our colleagues from the Community Wellbeing Hub. So that includes colleagues from HCRG Care Group, and our village agents as well are working with us. And it's a team of about between 10 and 15 of us doing welfare checks. And so far we've completed 75 checks, welfare checks with people, and we're making onward referrals. So we're doing quite a lot of welfare visits. So we're well ahead in terms of supporting those people coming through. We're keeping on top of it. We organise the welfare visits. They're really important to organise them as soon as someone has arrived, to ensure that they're here safely, their accommodation is okay and what is expected, that there are no safeguarding concerns. But we also go a bit beyond that and provide support and signposting to other services, schools, education, benefits advice, just general well-being support, and just generally be there as a person to help them, guide them through a difficult time and a settling time into the area. One of the things we're keen to do is link up with local support groups. So we know that There are already groups in the Somer Valley that are setting up English language classes. I think there's some in Timsbury happening at the moment. And I'm not sure if there's anybody from Bath College on the call at the moment, but they're also running some English language classes, and we'll be running some classes at Somer Valley over the summer, which is absolutely fantastic. So we're really keen to link up with local groups and get connected. So if you know of anything, any support that's happening out there, do get in touch and we'd like to link up with you. The ongoing support, as I mentioned, any Ukrainian guests can access support and their sponsors through the Community Wellbeing Hub, where the council, as you may be aware, will be receiving a grant of 10,500 per guest that arrives here in the area. And we are using that money to do a number of things. And some of that is about commissioning additional services. So we're commissioning Bath Welcomes Refugees. We're also commissioning Bath Mind and the CAB and other services to provide additional support. I think it's fair to say that every service is stretched across the whole public sector and launching community sector. And so we need to sort of build some capacity within those services to help support the Ukrainian guests. We're hosting events for sponsors and guests, and Bath Welcomes Refugees is helping with that. And we had our first online event for sponsors at the beginning of this week on Monday, which went down really well, and we hope to do more of those. We're setting up a dedicated newsletter for sponsors and guests to make sure that we keep up to date with information and news. And we will be advertising shortly a grant scheme that will be available for local groups and organisations to apply to support the guests, whether that could be around transport issues or setting up an English language class or whatever that is, that funding will be available. And if you need information or you'd like to share that on your website, your own website, the council is keeping its own website up to date about the support that's available, and that's regularly updated. So do keep that in mind. And if you have got the opportunity to share it on your own Facebook pages or websites, then please could you share that for us. That's the end of my update, but I'm more than happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Liz Harden?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hi. Sarah, I talked to you about our family in Ukraine that were quite hard up. I know they'd received, benefits, etc., or some money, etc., but they hadn't received the universal credit, and I would have thought they applied about 4 weeks ago, and it doesn't arrive for 6 weeks. I wonder, were you able to help them?
Yes, so we can provide additional support for people while they wait for their payments. Liz, we can talk about that particular family separately,
Sure.
but we have been providing additional funds for people while they wait for their benefits to arrive. So we don't want universal credit and benefit payments. You can get an advance payment. We don't want people to get into debt, because that advance payment is actually a loan and is required to be paid back. And so we're very conscious that we don't want people to get into debt when they arrive here. And so we're providing additional funds to help people. So we can do that quite easily, but we can pick that up separately about that particular individual family.
Yeah. Well, it's just to get the principle, accepted, because in case we have more families, just in case that comes up again. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Liz. And thanks for your support, because I know you've been helping the families in Porton. So thanks very much for your support, Liz.
Ron?
Yes? Yeah, just briefly, Sarah, my daughter is a school headmistress, and she's concerned about, there were some proposals for translators. Do you know if that's progressed at all?
We have translation.
Tablet translators, yeah.
We have got a translation service that we've brought in, but I'm not sure about that specific issue, but perhaps we could pick that up separately, and I could contact her direct, and we could follow that up with her, if that's okay, Ron.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you. And I know I think Kelly, you're from the college, aren't you? And I don't know to give us a bit of an update on the fantastic work that you're doing.
So basically, we're running family sessions on Wednesdays throughout August at our Somer Valley campus. So they're going to be kind of art and craft sessions. just for people to kind of build a community for themselves. And also, obviously, we've got the English language school at City Centre. So if people want referrals in for sort of ongoing English sessions, we're running assessments on Wednesdays. So I will pop my email in the chat. If anyone wants more information or wants a time and a date for an assessment, then yeah, just let us know and we can sort that out for you. Obviously, everything's free. Yeah. Anything else? Just any questions or concerns with it? Just yeah, give us a shout.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for your support. Thank
Right.
you.
Paul
Thank you.
is got his hand up as well. You have to unmute, please. Bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Thanks, Paul. You can type your question in the chat and we could pick it up if that's all right.
And there are 19 in chat. Should we have a
Is there some
look?
chat questions? Yeah, okay.
Right,
So let's have a quick look. So we've got people signing in. Is there anybody questions? No, okay, there's no questions specifically about, I don't think. I'm just scanning very quickly. Is there anything else? Oh, Peter Morgan has got his hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening. Me and a number of other residents of Springfield Buildings are having an SVEZ meeting at 7 o'clock. I was
Okay.
very interested to see what was going to be said on this site this evening, but you're not scheduled to actually start it until 6:55. Is there any way that the agenda could be reorganized?
I'm sure that's possible. I think unless I've got any other questions, I think my items come to an end, but if the chair's happy to bring that one forward and that doesn't affect any of the other speakers, then I'm sure that's,
So then
that's
we're talking
possible.
about item 6. Is everybody
Thank you very
happy?
much.
Yeah, to bring that forward. Yeah. Okay, then right. Well, we'll go on to item 6 then next, and so that Richard Holden can give us an update on the Summer Valley Enterprise Zone, please.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Just double check on that. Good, okay, thanks everybody. And I'm very happy to bring the item forward. Peter, just so you're aware, there's, in terms of this presentation, it's very similar to the webinar presentation. It's with fewer people and it's a slightly shorter form, but in principle, it's the same information. There's a little bit of additional information towards the end around a skills piece, but very happy to. So I don't think you'll see a lot of difference between this and the webinar that was held on the 19th, although it'll be shorter form than we had before. But first of all, thank you, Summer Valley Forum, for hosting us again. I know that we presented to you, I think the back end of last year, I think, on the Enterprise Zone, and we've been doing some work since then. I'm Richard Holden. I am the Operations Manager for Bath and Summer Valley Enterprise Zone and Client Lead on the project, so Council's lead on the project. Just in terms of an update for you on the engagement timeframe, we are in an engagement, an informal public engagement at the moment. That's been running from the 19th of May and runs through until the end of June. We're obviously, Peter, going to organise a direct conversation with the Springfield Buildings, and we're looking forward to that opportunity to come and see you face to face. I'm happy to attend that once you've got a date in the diary. So this is the start of an engagement process. So this is an informal engagement process, but later on in the year there will also be a formal consultation when the LDO, the Local Development Order, comes forward. This presentation is going to take about probably 25 minutes, and there'll be time for questions at the end. There is, as I say already, there's a fuller recorded version of the 19th of May webinar on our website link. So that will be available at the end of the at the end of the the presentation. Okay, let's just move into. So first of all, just to say the red line on this drawing essentially defines the area of the enterprise zone, which was allocated back in 2007 as a red line for employment land. That was subject at the time to extensive consultation and was brought forward to the inspector. So the allocation has been in place for a good period of time. The Somer Valley Enterprise Zone is proposed as a new area of commercial development with essentially a local employment hub for the Somer Valley. It's located at Old Mills and extends to about 13.5 hectares in scale. And through this engagement, we're seeking feedback and comments from the community and from local businesses and from all stakeholders. And I'll come on to give you a little bit of information on the stats we have received so far in terms of the engagement. Why do we need to intervene? Essentially to provide a number of things: new jobs for local people, encouraging sustainable economic growth in the Somer Valley, and also to reduce the amount of out commuting that takes place in the Somer Valley. There's a lot of people who jump in their cars and go to jobs outside the Somer Valley. We're trying to redress that, at least in part, not in its totality, but at least in part through this intervention at the enterprise zone. And that will assist in lowering carbon emissions and some of the smaller vehicle congestion on the road. We're also looking to encourage business and employment growth in the area, by providing that new industrial floor space, which the demand suggests is desperately needed. And as I said already, the site has been allocated for employment since 2007. And the reason the council is promoting the LDO and bringing this forward is because the private sector hasn't been able to come together itself to deliver the site out, and that is in part because, well, in a significant part because the cost of the enabling infrastructure itself is so significant and cost prohibitive that it makes viability very difficult for the private sector itself, and the public sector needs to intervene to provide that level of support and funding to enable the site to come forward. But it's also worth saying just a few other points I just want to cover here, that there is SEVEZ is designed to be a sustainable economic engine in the Somer Valley, and responding to a really well-documented lack of ready supply of sustainable commercial space in the Somer Valley, but also responding to the declared climate emergency and the declared ecological emergencies. But also the enterprise zone does form part of a broader package of intervention in the Somer Valley. So as examples, we have, as a council, we're promoting the Heritage Action Zone, which is being promoted also by, very much promoted by Midsummer Norton Town Council. And that's an economic stimulus in the centre of Midsummer Norton that is promoting a new market hall and new market stalls in the High Street. We're also working to deliver the High Street Renewal Programme in Midsummer Norton, which essentially is shopfront improvements, new signage and wayfinding. And also there's the Radstock Healthy Living Centre, which is a surgery and family centre in Radstock Town Centre. And also similarly, we're working through Somer Valley Rediscovered on green infrastructure projects, linking all the green spaces that run throughout the Somer Valley, which are probably not as well known as people might be aware. And we're promoting that in terms of an active travel route to link through to people. And then, so I think that's probably enough said on that slide. Okay. So just bear with me, I'm getting a note. I'm probably showing things up. I'm showing my notes, which you don't want to see, so you're not seeing the full screen. Just bear with me. No, I need that. So if you just bear with me, it now seems to be picking up on, sorry. We'll just try that one more time. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, everybody, we'll keep going as we are. My apologies. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I'm not used to using Zoom these days, so it's gone on to, I'm more used to using Teams, so I'm not using it quite as I should be. So let me just move on. I'm just going to bring in my one of the development team who was working on the project, Kevin Hunt, who's just going to talk us through what a local development order is. So I did complete that previous slide, so apologies for the slight confusion. But we'll now go into this slide, and I'll let Kevin pick up, and then I'll come back in, step in and complete the slide deck.
Good evening, everybody. So just thought it'd be worth recapping for those of you that have spoken with us before, just to recap what a local development order is. And effectively, it's a form of a planning framework which grants permitted development rights for certain types of development to be built on the site without the need for a subsequent planning application to be submitted. So the LDO is designed to be flexible, to allow different buildings to be built on a particular site, as long as it's within the terms of what the LDO says that building can be. So that will include, for example, the uses of the individual buildings, the maximum heights of those buildings, and what those buildings will look like, because that will be controlled by a design code. So once the LDO is approved, it means that developers can come along working with the landowner and the council, and as long as their proposals align with the terms of the LDO, it means they can immediately start that development and build process, and therefore deliver new buildings on the site much more quickly. And that obviously has economic benefits in terms of getting people into jobs and contributing to the local economy. So we need to be very clear that when we're looking at new buildings on this site, they would always be in line with the terms of the LDO, which is why it's important that we take feedback from the community now as to what that LDO is and what it would in the future allow permission for those individual buildings to be delivered. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Kevin. So I'm just going to move on now to a bit of a review of the site analysis. Again, the greater detail on this is available on the webinar link through our Baines website, which I'll come on to in a second. So again, just to remind us of the red line for the site. So this is the extent of the enterprise zone at Old Mills. And again, just to reiterate, it's 13.5 acres, about 13.5 hectares, about 33.3 acres. So I just wanted this series of slides that are coming up help just to set the context of how the master plan has been brought forward. So what the team has worked through is essentially they've looked at the constraints on the site, and then used those constraints as really as an opportunity to start to develop and build up the master plan itself. So some of the constraints, as an example, are that the site essentially runs from north to south, from this top northeast corner down to the bottom southwest corner. There's a fall of about 19 meters in that slope, but the slope actually does. But we're utilizing that and using that as a benefit and an opportunity to put the taller buildings on the site in the center of the site. What this plan itself, it's currently on the screen, shows essentially is the extent of some of the existing green planting on site. So what we're looking to do, we're looking to work with existing hedgerows and retain as many of those as possible, where there's because they help define and set the parameters for the plots that you'll see as we develop and come forward. Some of the hedgerows are being lost, but only those where there's considered to be less biodiversity and in that location. So I'll move on to the next slide. This slide essentially shows the main access to the site. So at the moment, for those of you who know the area, the A362, I don't know whether you can see my cursor, runs essentially to the south of the site, but it has a very awkward S-bend in it. And it causes enormous amount of problem at the moment in terms of the access for existing vehicles that use the A362, particularly if you get a couple of HGVs coming together at the S-bend, they can get into quite a lot of difficulty. So one of the things we've done with the intervention is we've looked to move that the access road to the north and away from the existing A362 location, which essentially will become a road that the A362 moves to the north, and the existing route is no longer utilised. And the access point is a new roundabout. At the moment, that roundabout is looking quite large. We're looking with the team, working with the team to try and reduce that in its scale to make it as unintrusive as possible. But I think one of the important things just to note is that the development happens further north than one might normally anticipate, or you might anticipate the development happening if you're considering the existing road A362 alignment as the route to access the site. I'll move on quickly. Okay, so the other thing that we're doing is we are looking to put in a large amount of structural planting to the perimeter of the site in particular, but also throughout the site, but to the perimeter of the site because it helps screen the plots on the site for those people who are looking from the outside in. But also it helps to line the active travel routes, which I'll come on to in a second, which run throughout the enterprise zone. So this slide essentially shows a large area of, essentially it's a break through the middle of the enterprise zone. We've tried to, we worked very closely with the design review panel to look at the original concept drawings for the enterprise zone itself and for the illustrative master plan. And this plan shows a natural break that we've looked to work with in the enterprise zone that breaks up the development to the front of the site and that to the rear of the site. And it introduces a large amount of public realm and again, a large amount of structural planting, but it also includes attenuation. I'm going to call them attenuation ponds, but they're not actually ponds. They will, for the most part, be empty of water, and they will only fill with water at the points when there is a large amount of water on site. So there are attenuation ponds. There's also attenuation under the car parking spaces and the car parking areas on site. But that structural planting is looking to create a really strong public realm throughout in the centre of the park and leading into the park as you enter. And then we've also really worked very closely with the existing public rights of way. So there are a number of public rights of way that run through the site and that connect into the site. And this slide, defines essentially the active travel routes throughout the enterprise zone and the park within a park concept. What we've very much looked to do with the illustrative master plan is work with those existing public rights of way and connect into other active existing footpaths and active travel routes outside of the enterprise zone itself. So as an example, there is an east cycle track which runs from the enterprise zone and will connect in with the existing Norton Radstock Greenway. To essentially create those active travel links. We're trying to get people to move more out of their cars if they're going to come to the site and they're going to work on the site, particularly if they're coming locally. We're looking to get people as much as possible, promote people getting out of their cars and using those active travel networks, so they walk to the site or they cycle to the site. And the idea of the existing these roadways that you can see in grey is that they promote active travel also and active movements through the site itself. So if you're coming to the site as an employee, you might use this as a leisure walk during the course of the day or a fitness run around the perimeter of the site. But that's available also to members of the public if they want to come and use this space. And then all those constraints and those opportunities have helped define essentially the active zones, the zones of use within the enterprise zone and the park itself. And this slide essentially shows those development zones. That doesn't mean that the entirety of those zones will be developed. It's just showing essentially a definition of the uses in those locations. So you can see from this slide that we have Plot P1 is essentially a pub location. Plot P2 is a hotel. P4 is a food and beverage, and those are all ancillary uses that help the vibrancy of the site and help support the activities that are taking place on the site. P3 is at the moment shown as a trade counter use and trade counter and distribution use. P4, I've already talked about P4. P5 to the front there, to the green, is essentially office accommodation. There are 2 blocks to the front and 1 to the back. I'll come on and show that in a second. P6 and P8 are essentially flexible workspace locations. So they could flex between studio type space for office accommodation, but they could also flex into light industrial accommodation. So the idea of those units is that they would look like essentially a small light industrial unit, but you could set out, you could take out a frontage, you could have a roller shutter door, or you could put in essentially a glazed frontage. So it could either be a light industrial unit or a workspace hub. P7 again is workspace, and P12 to the back is shown as a depot. The reason for that is that we have high voltage cables that run throughout the site in that location, so it kind of constrains the ability to do anything other than a depot site in that location. It's also probably worth saying that the low voltage cables that run across the site would also look to bring those off the cables and drop them into the estate road, so they'll go underground as opposed to being overground as they are at the moment. And then P10 is a distribution warehouse. That is not too large in scale because we don't consider that the distribution requirements in the Somer Valley. We've had a piece of work undertaken. We're not anticipating that will be anything other than a distribution warehouse that will serve the local and regional area. It won't be a national distribution type warehouse, so it won't be extremely large in scale. And then P9 and P11 at the back are potential for light industrial or warehousing units as well. Okay. So that then leads us on to the illustrative master plan itself. So these plots that you see, so the use plots you saw before are now converted into what we are defining as parameter plans. So these are not defined designs for the buildings on these plots. They are parameter plans within which development can come forward. They set the context, they essentially set the envelope for which development takes place on those individual plots. So as I say, we've got, I hope you can see my cursor, we have to the front southwest, we've got 2 office buildings. Again, this is the structural planting and the walkway around the site. This is an office block here, workspace, light industrial, depot at the back. There's a depot, this is the distribution warehouse. Again, that's a light industrial unit at the back there. These are industrial units as well, or warehousing units. This is the hotel, this is the pub, and this is the food and beverage in support. And this is our trade counter opportunity. We look very closely at this and work very closely with the local stakeholder group because in order to make sure that we got a use on site that they were comfortable with. We had shown this originally as a retail offer, but we've changed that out due to concerns expressed around having an element of retail on site, and we've looked to introduce instead a trade counter operation in that location. So then that just takes us on to a really quick summary of the floor area. So we've got about, by floor area, we've got about 56% of the site, so 200,000 square feet or so of light industrial storage and distribution space. And then sort of what is classed as business class E, which is essentially office accommodation. We've got about 113,000 square feet of that. A depot of about 7,750 square feet. The hotel is about 29,000 square feet, and the total food and beverage, which is essentially the pub and this small food and beverage unit, of about 10,000 square feet, so about 3% of the total floor area for the enterprise zone. Again, these are indicative because this is an illustrative master plan. The floor areas might adjust slightly as we come forward with the LDO itself, the local development order, later in the year. And then I think this is probably quite an important slide for everybody. This is in part a bit of a work in progress in terms of we've still got a piece of work called a landscape visual impact assessment to undertake here, which will very much inform the final heights of the buildings. But this is essentially a good indicator of how we anticipate the the heights of the buildings working. So what you can see in the square is essentially the number of floors in those units. So if it's got a 2 in the square, it's about 2 floors. If it's got a 3 in the square, it's about 3 floors. Those are not, those are, I suppose what I would say is those are irregular in number. So for example, these office buildings at the front in the southwest corner are shown as 2-storey. They're up to about 8 to 10 meters in height. This building is also an office that's 3-storey, between up to 12 to 14 meters. That's the highest building in the site. But those are essentially 3 conventional floors. For example, this building in the middle here, the distribution hub at 2 stories, essentially is a building which will have probably a large open plan space, but with a mezzanine floor in it, hence it's shown as 2-storey. And clearly the market and the occupiers demand certain specification of buildings. So that's the reason why the buildings are at the height they are. Quite often you get standard eaves heights, for example, for large industrial or distribution type warehouses, where there's a minimum requirement that the industry requires in order to utilize that space. And then just to help, just to put this in some context, I think this is probably again quite a helpful slide, I'm hoping, for people to understand. This is a slice through the site, and it's a slice through the site straight through the Wix warehouse, which is currently fronting onto the A362, which is around about, can't quite see it here, it's actually about 9 to 10 meters in height to the eaves. This building is essentially Portland House, that's 9 meters in height. We've got and then we've got the warehouses at the back on the enterprise zone, which are somewhere between 8 to 10 meters in height to the eaves. They'll be taller to the ridge, but relatively speaking, they are in keeping with the existing heights on site. But that is all subject to the landscape visual impact assessment, which is a piece of work that started and is ongoing. It's a really important piece of work that the project team need to conclude, and it's an important piece of evidence that needs to come forward in support of the LDO when we submit the LDO later in the year. Okay, so just want to go on now very briefly as I can do onto the transport strategy. This is essentially a really important second piece of work, but a very key piece of work to inform and evidence the project and so in support of the LDO itself. So we've been preparing, or the team has been preparing a comprehensive transport assessment that will consider the impacts of development at key locations. They've drawn on data from traffic data from pre-COVID, but also check data in November 2021. And the team have also engaged broadly with other stakeholders, including Baines Highways and Somerset County Council Highways as well, and also with First Bus, Design West and the West of England Combined Authority. And the main themes that are coming out of that transport summary are shown here on the table on the right-hand side. So in terms of modes of transport, we need to encourage access by sustainable modes. So that's in terms of bus access, but also walking and cycling. So that links back to those active travel links that we are promoting through the site. The existing bus facilities we know are poor on the A362. We'll be looking to address that with on the site. I'll come on to another slide in a second, which will show how. It can also be quite hard to cross the A362 at this location, and we're looking to resolve that with some pedestrian crossings. And also the A362, we all know this is relatively inconsistent in its speed limits. It runs from sort of 30 through to 40 up to national speed limit of 60 in locations, and there's a piece of work to look to try and consolidate that into a lesser impact in terms of the changes in speed. So we may well go from a 30 to a 40 only and not have the national speed limit as an example. And also we recognise there's existing congestion on the roads, and we need to address that through the evidence base that will be presented for the LDO, and we need to mitigate potential future traffic congestion that may take place on the site. So that table then translates that table on the previous slide then translates itself into this table, and the potential improvements are summarized here on the right hand side of this slide. So we're looking to, in terms of that need to promote accessible modes of transport, we'll prepare a travel plan for employees and visitors, and really encouraging those sustainable and active travel routes to and from the enterprise zone. We're also, as I've already mentioned, looking at a new walking and cycling connection to the Norton Radstock Greenway. And also on site, we'll be looking to promote 20% of the car parking spaces as EV charging spaces, but with the provision and the remainder of the space is enabled to take EV charging going forward as we progressively move towards hybrid and electric charging vehicles in general use. We're also looking to provide bus stops on the A362 outside of the enterprise zone. So that will again aim to promote and assist in delivering sustainable transport in the location. We recognise there's a broader conversation to be had around bus provision and bus route provision in the Somer Valley. That's a separate conversation to an extent, but very happy to take any questions on that. And also we're looking to introduce safe crossing points on the A362. We're also looking to review the speed limit within Farrington Gurney and along the A362, as I mentioned just a moment ago. And we're also looking to widen the road at Sunnyside. At the moment, there's a real pinch point there, which is actually put in as a traffic calming measure, but it's causing quite a lot of disruption in that location. The idea would be to retain the parking outside those cottages, but also then extend the roadway so it moves slightly further to the north to increase, to provide 2 lanes of traffic flow in that location. And that should stop the amount of stop-start traffic that takes place in that location. Aligned with the speed limit changes, we have a level of confidence that will improve the noise levels in that location. And obviously we're looking to remove the bend on the A362 immediately outside the enterprise zone that fronts onto the existing cottages there, and move the access road further to the north. And then we're also looking at the potential for mitigations, that's improvements at a number of locations on the travel network. I'll come on to show what that extends to, but particularly we're looking at the Thicket Mead roundabout, which can get a bit congested in the morning, particularly with the school run as well as people commuting. And we recognise that, and the modelling exercise that will be undertaken will respond to that in terms of potential mitigations in that location. And we're also looking at the potential for a signalised junction or greater signalisation at the A37 or A367 at the Farrington Gurney end, potentially looking to extend the left turn lane to ease traffic flows in that location. Okay, I just want to pick up on this, the CRSTS project, which is an important intervention. This is not a project that the council, that Baines is leading on. It's a council that the WECA, West of England Combined Authority, are leading on. But essentially, there was a city regional sustainable transport settlement was provided by the government at the back end of last year. It released about £500 million of funding to the WECA to look at sustainable transport interventions in the region. And one of the corridors that's being looked at actively is the A37, A367 improvement project, which includes the A362. So it's the A37 that runs down from Bristol, down to Farrington Gurney, along the A362, and then up the A367 towards Bath. And the work that WECA are doing, so they're at an early stage, they're developing their outline business case, they're looking at options along that corridor to improve and to enhance sustainable transport. So that's getting people more onto buses and out of their cars. But that also links into active travel mechanisms as well. So one of the options within that package of works is looking at extending the Norton Radstock Greenway out to Farrington Gurney from its existing location along the railway line, but bypassing the Sunnyside cottages at the back. Okay, so, and again, I just wanted to demonstrate to you just the extent of the traffic modelling, the transport modelling that's going on. So this amber spider's web shows the network of roads that are being assessed through what's called a VISIM model. It's a simulation model of what the traffic flows will look like on the roads once the enterprise zone is delivered. So we're looking at the main flows along the A road, but also we're looking at about 45 side roads as well. So that's a fairly extensive piece of work. It's underway and well advanced as a piece of work. And that informs essentially the mitigations that will take place at those junctions I mentioned before. So moving swiftly on. So what are the benefits that we see and we perceive for the enterprise zone as an allocated site? So the grant of the LDO will essentially positively and proactively shape sustainable development. It will create about 1,300 new jobs locally and around 40,000 square meters. That's about 450,000 square feet of commercial floor space. It will provide flexibility to ensure necessary and viable development comes through the LDO process, which Kevin's already picked up on earlier in the presentation. And it will enable that LDO process enables regeneration to come forward in a much swifter way. We're also looking to encourage a connected network of walking and cycling through those active travel links into the Norton Radstock Greenway and into the existing public rights of way. There'll be a quality of public space, which we already alluded to in the presentation, and a balanced car parking approach. We're trying to balance ourselves between parking policy, but also ensuring we don't put too much parking on site, but we're promoting the EV charging as well to help mitigate the amount of car parking that will take place on site. And the buildings that we're looking to deliver, that will be delivered on site, will be sustainable. We're looking at low energy buildings that are targeting net zero carbon in construction and in delivery. And we're enhancing the existing green space. So one of the policy requirements of delivering the site is we have to add 10% to the biodiversity net gain. Whilst it's currently green fields, actually in terms of the ecology itself, it's relatively low amount of ecology on site. We're looking to enhance that through, and we have to enhance that through the intervention that takes place on the enterprise zone. And we're looking at characterful architecture. That's one of the areas we're looking for feedback on from the engagement, is what do people feel should the architecture look like? And we're looking to supplement the uses with a vibrant, viable and active site. So those are uses, those are the food and beverage use, the pub use and the hotel use, which will help support the occupiers on site, but also provide an opportunity for people locally to go and use those spaces. Okay, very quickly, in terms of skills at Somer Valley, we've had a look at the existing sectors and done a sector analysis in terms of the types of users and sectors that will come to site. That demonstrates that probably we've got in terms of higher levels and moderate levels qualifications. So higher levels is NVQ4, that's undergraduate level. Moderate qualification is A level and above. We've got about 76% sitting within that range, and the lower skill range is around about 24% lower skills and limited skills anticipated on site. What we will be doing is working much more closely with the college over time as well, to look at apprenticeships, and also with local employers to look at potential apprenticeships. And we'll also be outreaching into schools over time to help promote potential pathways for skills development going forward. That's a later stage activity, but it is something that we're starting to look at and work with our business and skills team at the council. Okay, so again, just very finally, we've got Somer Valley strengths in terms of the sectors. We've got specialist construction, that's modern methods of construction, and also construction and food manufacturing in particular are strong in the Somer Valley area. We think there's a limited risk. There's an assessment. There's a limited risk of the requirement for higher amounts of distribution space because of the fact that the enterprise zone sits within a region where the road network is not strong enough to support national distribution. It's more likely to support local business and local distribution. So in terms of our timeline, we are now at public engagement, which is as of today, Q2 2022. The LDO is looking to be submitted later in the year, later in this year, Q3, towards the end of that, and then the LDO determined towards the very end of the year, end of Q3, Q4 2022. And then this is essentially a slide. So we're obviously doing these engagement events, and we've run the public webinar itself. We've been to see Radstock Town Council. We've come back to the Somer Valley Forum. We'll have a meeting with the local residents as well coming up, which will be an important meeting. But we also have an online web presence through the council, and access to a questionnaire on that website, which we'd like people to fill out. But we also have presentation boards. So for those people who have not got access to the web, we've got presentation boards available at Midsummer Norton Library, at Radstock Library, and also at Porton Library. So thank you to all those who have helped in bringing that forward. That's been very helpful. And we are starting to see feedback come through those library locations. We've had over, I think, 2,400 unique views on the website already. We've had 191 online responses to the questionnaire, and we've had over 70 responses to the questionnaire and 191 views of the original recorded webinar on YouTube. So again, strong numbers, and we're starting to see that play through in terms of the feedback we're getting, which has been is exactly what we want. It's really helpful. I mean, it will help define and reinforce the master plan that we bring forward later in the year with the consultation. So that is me done. I will stop screen sharing. I'm sorry that we had a slightly technical glitch earlier on, but happy to take questions.
Yeah, well, we've got a number of questions on chat, and so Sarah's going to deal with those because she's handling the machine.
So I think, Richard, you answered some of the questions about the level of engagement and the consultation process, but Peter Morgan asks if you could explain the south junction off the roundabout.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether you could explain that.
Yes, happy to.
And then there are some questions about the impact of traffic and the lack of buses and the priority for walking and cycling. So I don't know if you could just go back over those. There was a number of comments about that in the chat. I've just summarised them into those groupings, but they specifically were asking about the impact of traffic, bus transport and walking and cycling.
Yeah, fine, thank you. So just dealing with the first point, that southern link off the roundabout essentially links back into Langley's Lane in the south. So we need to maintain that access onto Langley's Lane. So that's the purpose of that. Peter, I think your concern, I think you've expressed it in the past, is around, does that then promote the potential to promote access from what is Old Mills Phase 2 onto Langley's Lane, which I think we've responded to directly in previous questions. But just to reiterate that that link on the south is purely to Langley's Lane to retain that access. It will also essentially give it will enable residents of the cottages there to access more safely onto that southern spur and then access onto the roundabout, rather than the route that is currently taken. And the existing A362 essentially will be stopped up. So the one that links back then through towards Tesco's gets stopped up, but provides essentially a dead end to the other two buildings that sit on that whole part of the A362. I would say, just worth saying, that the proposals that are there, I think there is another planning applications come through on Old Mills Phase 2. It's in the same form as it was, I think, in the past couple of iterations. The access to that Phase 2 allocated land comes through the existing estate road at Old Mills and doesn't link in any other way. So we're not involved in that project, but that's the mechanism which provides access and egress to the Old Mills Phase 2. Generally, in terms of the traffic and concerns about congestion, we recognise that. That's why the visit modelling has to take place. We are required to look very closely at the traffic network and how the enterprise zone impacts the local road network. So what the team have done, they've done essentially a baseline assessment. They've said, what does the situation look like now? That modelling and all that work has been done. What they then add on to that model is the anticipated new movements as a consequence of the enterprise zone's presence in the Somer Valley. That then leads to an assessment of the impact on particular key junction areas, for example, that I've already mentioned, and will then lead to a series of mitigations for those particular junctions to resolve those particular junctions. We recognise that the local roads are, they are a legacy from the mining past, and they're not necessarily set up at this point to take the traffic that they do take, but we will be required to look at that network and to make improvements in some of those locations, which might also include a level of road widening in some locations that may not be a requirement of the development itself, but will be something which will be looked at potentially by the highways and transport colleagues at the council generally. Then in terms of the bus network itself, we recognise that, as a project team and as a council, we recognise that there are challenges and concerns about local bus networks. I've been told about the local number 82 bus route particularly, which is a bit of a problem for some people, and there are other particular routes. there is work that will start and will be ongoing, which looks at how can the bus network be supported in the region. That is a piece of work that will happen between WECA as well as with Baines in terms of support for the bus network. What we're looking to do is promote as much as possible people getting out of their cars and into those sustainable transport types of modal shifts, so moving into buses. That CRSTS program that I mentioned already is looking at actively promoting the infrastructure to enable people to move towards sustainable transport mechanisms. And then in terms of the, I think I've already picked up hopefully on the active travel route. So we're looking very much to promote active travel, that's walking and cycling in the Semmer Valley, linking as much as possible, linking from, if we can do Farrington Gurney, all the way through on the Norton Radstock Greenway, through to the Enterprise Zone and into Midsummer Norton and beyond, down into Radstock, using the existing green infrastructure routes that already exist. So did I pick up everything on that?
Yes, thank you. I think Linda's
Yeah,
take some questions.
Yeah, we've got 4 people who've put questions in, so we'll go with those. I hate to say this, but I'm afraid we're an hour gone on this
Sorry,
subject.
yeah, apologies.
Well, no. So we have got to sort of be sensible about this. So as I say, I've got 4 people: Liz, Ron, Peter, and Michael Evans. So if we go in that order, and please just ask the question, not making statements. If you've got statements, then you can go online and put those on there. So if we come to you first, Liz, please, question.
Thank you. And questions for you, Richard. Firstly, if we look back at slide 6, I just wanted to confirm that some of the land that's included in slide 6 includes some of the farmer's land immediately to the north and south of his land. And I have raised this at our stakeholders group. Has this been resolved? Is this land still part of the enterprise zone, which was in dispute? My second question is the flexibility that the local development order will have and permitted development rights. Does this mean that if we wanted to have warehousing moved, or as well as on plot 12, that it could be on number 9, unit 9 or unit 8, that once permitted development is there, it opens the door to anything that we are thinking of having on this enterprise zone? And my last question is one that has really worried some of us, is the warehouse, the biggest warehouse, unit 12 on the industrial zone. It's also the largest, 12 metres. That means it's 2 metres above Paulton House, and we're just a bit concerned it's going to dominate the landscape. You'll be able to see it from Paulton and from areas around, and also from the road. So that's just 3 questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Liz. I will. I'll bring Kevin in on the response to the second point around the LDO itself and the permitted development position, because it's a good question. In terms of the land conversation, the allocation includes the land just to the north and to the south of the farm you're talking about. It always has done. We are in active conversation with the landowners there. And we are at a difference. We need to resolve that. We will resolve that in the coming months. I probably don't really want to say much more than that in this public forum, if that's okay, Liz. But what I would say is
needs to be resolved, though. You know.
Well, absolutely. We are in active conversation with all the landowners, and have been for probably two years. We recognise there are still challenges, but we're continuing to work to try and deliver those out. But we're working within the original allocation at the moment in terms of the LDO delivery. Kevin, can I bring you in on the LDO and the permitted development position, please, if I may?
Yeah, sure. So Richard showed earlier a plan which indicated the uses on particular plots. It was slide 12 of the presentation. So within those plots indicate the uses that would be allowed to be developed on them. There isn't any way that you can kind of trade them, if you like. So you can't say, well, I no longer want B8 use on this plot, I want to move it onto that one. If it's approved under the LDO, then each of those plots will say we're allowed these uses, but you're not allowed other uses.
Great, good, thank you, thank you. That's reassuring.
And then just your final point, Liz, on the larger unit. As I said during the presentation, we've got to do this landscape visual impact assessment piece of work. That's a critical piece of work in terms of helping inform the heights position. The enterprise zone kind of works in our favor in that it falls away from the highest point to the lowest point. So we're putting the taller buildings in the center of the site, and we're looking to keep the lower story buildings to the perimeter of the site as much as possible. So we still got to present that to the key stakeholder group, and we will do once that piece of work has been developed a bit further. The team are working on it, and as soon as we have it, we'll present it to you, and we'll be happy to present it to other local stakeholder groups who will have a very keen interest in understanding what that looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay then, so we go on, and the next one is Ron, please.
You're on mute, Ron.
Richard, we've talked about this in some detail, you and I, in the past, in some depth. When do you consider Baines will take it to consult with Westfield Parish Council, who dominate the entire length of the A367 into Radstock? When you talk in your presentation about access to Shepton Mallet and that kind of thing, how you intend to get from that site to Shepton Mallet without using the A367 is an amazing thought to me. Secondly, it kind of passed your mind that this is entirely A37, A362 junction driven. So all the sources for your fabulous distribution centre will be fed by trucks and then distributed by vans. And the source for those trucks has got to be Bristol, because Bath is the other side of the knot that you say is mining generated traffic. How are you going to handle that? And finally, how do you think that operations in Radstock are going to be affected by people working in 1960s, 70s and 80s buildings in Radstock and to a degree Midsomer Norton are going to feel about continuing to work in those when they have these new units available? You sure there won't be a drain from those areas into this new trading estate?
Yep, thanks, Ron. Just in terms of the access, I mean, we can't predict wholly where the vehicles come from. We're expecting them to come from all different locations. We're expecting them to come down the A37, along the A362, down from the A367, along the and all local roads. It's the reason why we have to do the modelling we have to do. We have to look at the whole network and say what's the impact on those local roads. And there may well be some that will travel across between Midsomer Norton and Radstock, and that's built in within, that will be built in within the modelling. So we've already done those transport counts. We understand what the transport makeup looks like, and we'll build on the enterprise zone on top of that. In terms of your second point around the stock, I've said this probably numerous times. I think there's a place for a broad mix of stock. So some of the space that is on the enterprise zone won't suit people who are in those 1960s, 70s building, because they won't. It's not space that they will be able to readily afford for their business. So there is a business ecosystem and a demand ecosystem within any location. And what we are seeing from the enterprise zone, from the demand work that's taking place, is that there are probably 3 to 4% voids. Pre-pandemic, these figures are 3 to 4% voids in light industrial and warehousing in the locality, which is a really low figure. So we know anecdotally that sometimes you have to wait for 3 years to get a unit. So for example, we've got anecdotal evidence of people waiting 3 years to get a unit on Old Mills. There's about 4,000 square feet of space available at the moment at Old Mills. That's a very small amount of space that will probably go very, very quickly. I think the other thing that's also worth saying on this is this is a medium-term intervention. We anticipate it being built out over a 5 to 10 year period probably. So over that time, one would expect that the economy will change and there's still to be demand. So there is demand now, even in a difficult situation. We expect that will still be there going forward. But it's something we're asking the team to keep a really close eye on, is what is the demand looking like for the space. So they have to put a hand on the tiller at certain points throughout the course of this project. We test it on a regular basis to make sure the demand is still there. But I say one would anticipate that over the course of a 10-year period, the demand will, as it has proven through the property market, still be there for a good period of time.
You've missed my point.
Thank you. Hang
You
on
missed
a
my
minute.
point.
We've got to go on, Ron.
Chairman, you didn't answer my question about consultation with Westfield Parish Council.
Sorry. I think
You haven't.
we haven't offered it.
No.
Okay. Well, but then that's an error on our. I mean, yeah, we will do.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Thanks, Richard. Right. Pete doesn't seem to be with us anymore. So I'm going on to Michael Evans now, please, Michael.
Thank you, Linda. I'm hearing a lot about constraints and rules and regulations to be imposed on people that we're hoping will come forward and invest to produce employment on this site. We're at the same time rapidly expanding the population. There's 270 houses, I think it is, at the White Post site. We got a extra 550 houses from, or something like that, from Mendip to be bolted onto the edge of Midsomer Norton. So my worry is whether we can actually attract employers onto this site. Could you very briefly, Richard, just remind us of what are the inducements? What is the enterprise zone actually offering
So
to potential investors, employers, the private?
So there are a couple of things I think we're saying there, Michael. That the enterprise in the enterprise zone has essentially, in the normal course of events, an enterprise zone when the status is determined, has you get a rate-free holiday if you're not a rate-free, a rates assistance during the course of the first 3 years of your occupation, up to about 275,000 of rateable value, or you can get a capital allowance provision. Because of but that actually expired in March of this year, that ability. So the way in which the enterprise zone now the way in which we can now promote activity is by streamlining and de-risking the site, by going through the LDO route, and the council promoting and seeking the business case funding to deliver the enabling works. That's the road infrastructure itself and the estate road onto site. And by implementing the LDO itself, then we streamline the process for the private sector to step in and develop out the site. But it may well also be that the council will look to directly be involved in delivery of the enterprise zone and actively develop out the sites. We've done it already in Bath, and there's definitely a willingness to look at that as a way to promote the site going forward.
Thank you, very interesting.
Thank you very much, Richard. I appreciate all of that. And everybody, if you look at chat, you see there's a comment there. You can find details of this on the website, and it gives you all the information. So anything else you have to say, please go and have your say there. Right then, well, we've now got to move on, and I'm going backwards now. We're going up to ask Simon de Beer to come in and talk about place engagement, please.
Evening, everybody. I'm Simon de Beer from the Council's Head of Planning, but I'm not here in that capacity. What I'm here in the capacity is the lead of the new virtual place team, which our new director, Sophie Broadwood, has set up. So I've been asked to keep my slot to 10 minutes. So I've got a presentation, but I'll whiz through some of the key slides and I'll leave most of it out. I think I can keep to 10 minutes. I'm sure you've sat long enough looking at presentations. So if I just share mine and I'll do the first few slides. Can everybody hear me okay? And can people see the presentation? Because I can't quite see what you're saying.
No, we can't. Oh, yeah, we can. Yes, see it now.
You can see that, can you? Okay, so I'll whiz through. So What the new director, Sophie Broadfield, has thought to introduce is a place team approach in the district. And I think this is partly in response to the fact that one of her observations in working for the council and joining the council fairly recently was she thought we don't do as well as we could as the council in the way we engage with communities. We put certain things in place, but she says it can be quite confusing for the parishes and for residents seeking to engage with the council. People quite often feel like get pushed from pillar to post. There's a whole range of services within BAMES, which run a complex number of projects and services. And from the outside, it doesn't always look very joined up. And sometimes the engagement with communities isn't joined up. And also there's an expectation that the council will probably address most issues when perhaps it could be slightly different to that. So what Sophie's instituted is using the forum, the area forums, as a place to create virtual teams within the council. And this is both within the council, the way the council operates, but also the way we engage with communities. So there aren't actual teams. We still have the relevant services operating the services and the projects, but we're going to try and work more based on place teams internally within the council. And there you'll be familiar with the place teams that have been around for quite some time now, and particularly the Summer Valley one, which it includes those parishes. And I think there's some.
Sorry to interrupt you, Simon. We can see two of your slides in your notes, so you might want to just bring up the one slide that you're talking to, so that we can just see the full slide.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to do that, to be honest, on Zoom. The problem is Richard. I'm afraid, if you mind seeing my notes, I'll just make them smaller like that then. Is it better?
That's better. Thanks, Simon. We can see your full slide now. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So you're familiar with it, with the area forum, but again, we can't see the Somerset, the Summer Valley area in isolation. There's obviously links with the rest of the district. Some parishes don't always fit neatly into certain forum areas, and I know that you've got flexibility in the way those operate. And already has been mentioned this evening, the links with Menda, with the Summer Valley towns being right on the southern boundary of the district. So what the new place teams seeks to do is provide each of the place areas has a head of service as a place lead. And so I've been asked to lead the Summer Valley place, which I'm very happy to do, being a resident in the area. And then the same for each of the others. And one of the previous slides I showed indicated which of the heads of service would be leading those. Now those heads of service aren't seeking to take on board and become the face of all the service areas. What they are is a point of contact for the communities. And we would then be part of a coordination role, so we can make sure that there's an understanding of the wider range of issues, and we can put you in touch with the right person. So one of the key things is to listen to local communities, to make sure we understand what people are saying, be a central point for residents and also businesses, and to make sure that we coordinate our engagement. And doing that, we want to agree a shared understanding of the issues affecting the Summer Valley and all the place areas. And that's not just within the council, but also across the council. So there's so much knowledge, information, and the people who live in the area have a wealth of information, understanding, knowledge, which we just don't always have in the council. So it's building on that. We want to make sure we really use this as a way to build positive working relationships. And quite often between us, we have to deal with quite difficult issues. And that's some of the spheres issue, just because it illustrates some of the complexities. We can't avoid having those conversations. We can't avoid having the fact that there are difficult decisions to be made and complex issues which don't always have easy solutions. But I think at least if we can build trust in the way the council operates and what's the priority for the local communities, that's what we're seeking to do with this new approach, just to use it to build trust and good working relationship with those communities. And then within the council, at least to be helpful to the communities, to make sure we've aligned what we're doing. So the various projects, the various programs, the timetables, the budgets we have access to, the grants, from some region, from external grants, looking at evidence collation, and obviously the council collects evidence and gains evidence, but I know there's evidence that people haven't and aware of in the community, and then working with partners. So what we want to do is begin to understand more clearly what the local priorities are, how those align with what BAMES is seeking to do in the areas, and how those reflect back in on national priorities and obligations on us. And also, as far as we can, to help communities develop some of their own solutions. As I said before, there's a wealth of knowledge and zeal quite often, and we found that particularly in my aspect from planning, that so people have got an incredible amount of passion for their own areas, and they're best placed quite often to begin looking for some of the solutions. And to some degree, we're being responsible for doing some of these things to help facilitate local action and local communities to solve some of their own issues. What I'm going to do now, but I'll shorten this bit. I was going to run through some of the projects. Just before I do that, that's just for your information, and I think these slides will be distributed afterwards. But those are the different services being included in the Soma Valley team, and there's a similar one for most of the other area teams. So a set of multidisciplinary cross-service staff which are working together, not as an actual team, they're still staying in their services, as I said, but making sure that we are as coordinated as we can be, so that we can then be as helpful as we can to communities. Now, I had a set of slides which I was going to run through some of the projects we're doing, something to be familiar with, and I think Richard Holden mentioned this one, for instance. There's a range of projects, the investment in Milton High Street, with improvements and enhancements to the streetscape, to buildings, but also just in terms of cultural activities. So you'll be familiar yourselves with the cultural program. I won't go on about spheres. We had a lot about spheres, which is done well. In Radstock, we're just kicking off some work around some of the vacant buildings and how best we can work with the local community to address some of the quite significant number of vacant buildings in the town centre. There's also the green infrastructure work across the Soma Valley area, and you probably be familiar with those particular projects in terms of improving biodiversity and connecting people to nature and improving those green opportunities for public access. Richard spoke about the links with Bristol and Bath and the WECA project for the corridor studies on the A37 and the A362 and the A367, so I won't repeat that. There's also going to be a joint local transport plan, which our transport colleagues are working on, and that seeks to replace the existing joint local transport plan, which covers the sub-regions. So it's a very large strategy, but it will have particular implications for all parts of the sub-region, including the Soma Valley, and particularly in some of the move towards a decarbonisation approach. And part of that, which you may want to look out for, is the decarbonisation study, which looks at all the kind of interventions that need to be taken to help us get to the objective of zero carbon by 2030. You'll also be familiar with the local plan partial update, which seeks to amend the existing local plan to update it, to increase some housing land supply, and to try and move towards some of those policies which are needed to address the climate ecological emergencies. And that's currently examination next week. So anyone wants to attend the hearings, they're in Bath, but you can also follow them online. And then this year we'll be starting the new local plan, which is a full review of all the planning policies of the district, and that's going to take 2 or 3 years, but we anticipate a launch in the autumn, and working with communities quite closely through the place-based approach over the next year. And we really have an ambition this time to make sure that the review of the local plan really involves input from the local communities and working closely with you, with the intention of getting to an formal options consultation next autumn. And then for the next steps then, having rushed through that very quickly, are really conversations around understanding your local priorities. And I know that Sophie has begun to come to some of the communities and some of the leads in the areas across the district, and began to try and understand where you want to get to, what you want to achieve, and how we can align that and work together with BAMES to align those projects and programs. So those will be the next steps, as a closer engagement and discussion with yourselves through the forums and through other mechanisms. So that's the end of the presentation. I'll stop sharing.
Are there any?
That was very, very quick. I hope I kept 10 minutes.
That was very quick, thank you. I can't see any hands up. Oh yes, there is. Eleanor. Yeah. Do you have anything to say, Eleanor?
Yes, I would like to know how this structure that's proposed will fit with a parish council trying to make a neighbourhood plan.
right?
And we still have our dedicated neighbourhood planning officer, George Blanchard, who will work with you and support you. And that's his sole job, is to support parish councils in bringing forward, reviewing and updating neighbourhood plans. So the place-based approach doesn't replace the services. Services still continue. We just want to make sure we're working in a much more cohesive way. And that's the intention of the place-based approach.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Right, okay, well, thank you very much, Simone, for that. And we'll now go on to item 4, Three Valleys Health Primary Care Network, which is, I believe, Helen Harris.
Hi there, good evening, everybody. I'm sorry, it's been a long time and you're probably shuffling in your seats, aren't you? So apologies for having the last slot. So I think I'm going to have some slides shared, but before I do, can I just creep in with a bit of a vaccination update? You know, I don't know how much you all have been involved in the programme, but I'm sure that many of you have had your jabs. And I just wanted to let you know that within the Three Valleys, you will know that we started with our vaccination programme at the Soma Centre, and then we moved to a practice-based model. And I'm just delighted to announce that we have delivered nearly 80,000 jabs from the 7th of January 2021 until the clinics that finish at the end of this week. So just a fantastic effort from clinical and administrative staff across our patch. And also to say a big thank you to those people, those residents in our community that volunteered to help us with that. You know, we had over 90 volunteers that helped us at the Soma Centre, and that was with patient navigation, car park marshalling, and you know, it felt like really dark days during those times when we were setting up. So thank you for all your support, much appreciated. And in fact, the PCN nominated that group for a Baines Shining Light Award, and I was delighted that they actually won that, which was very well deserved. So thank you. That's the vaccination update from me. And then I just wanted to talk to you about a few other primary care network related matters, if that's okay. And I've got some slides. And I know we've had a lot of those tonight, so I'm going to motor through them fairly quickly and start with number 2, if that's okay. Thank you very much. So I did actually do this presentation last night to the Chew Valley Forum. So it's a pleasure to be speaking to you again tonight. And I just really wanted to explain to you, what is a primary care network? You may have heard, you may not have heard of that expression before. Well, it's something that NHS England wanted to roll out within general practice. And it's groups of practices working together at scale where that makes sense to focus on local patient care and involving other health and care organisations to improve our population health. And you can see on that graph there, I've got Three Valleys Health at the middle, but what we're all about is forging close links with our community and also employing a range of other staff that can support us to deliver excellent patient care. Thank you. Next slide. So who are we geographically? Well, we are 11 GP sites across rural and semi-rural northeast Somerset. And what we decided to do to make things a little easy for us is style ourselves in 3 groups of 3. So we've got St Chad's, Somerton and Westfield practices working together in a smaller grouping, Chew, Harptree and St Mary's, and Elmhays, Hope House and Hillcrest. And we are employing a variety of staff to support us. Next slide, please. Well, and what are our aims and objectives? Well, we have got a patient population of over 68,000 now. And just to pinpoint, you know, where we are in the wider geography, we're the 2nd largest primary care network in a new, even bigger clinical commissioning group that is Baines, Swindon and Wiltshire. But actually that clinical commissioning group, you may already know, is set to change into what the NHS is calling an integrated care system. So with all of that landscape happening around us, I think it's really important that we are positioning ourselves within a group so that we have a collective voice for the GPs within our area. Now, the group is led by Dr. Elizabeth Hirsch, who's the clinical director, and she's also a GP partner at St Chad's. And we've got a board of GP partners and practice managers who meet monthly to agree our strategy. We've also got a really experienced senior nurse clinical steering group. And, you know, they were the brains behind the clinical expertise at the Soma Centre and within our vaccination centres. So it's great to have that knowledge and expertise. And also we've got an additional PCN workforce. So every practice is able to access a fair share of new services and staff. And I'll talk to you about those in a moment. And all of this work is underpinned by a network legal agreement. Next slide, thank you. So in the PCN workforce, we've got 23 new staff. That includes myself and a project manager. But also we're employing some clinical staff and some patient navigators to do a variety of things, and I've listed them there. But the main thing is that in general practice, we really need support. You know, we are struggling to recruit GPs, and we really need to think creatively about how we can continue to deliver a good service. So these extra staff are intended to reduce workloads and to really increase our resilience and to stabilise general practice. I think it's really important to say that strengthening that voice of primary care really will help us to improve our quality of service to our local population. And we're already getting involved in a new population health management programme to identify patients that need our extra support and are proactively reaching out to those patients rather than waiting for them to become in crisis and having to do something urgently. And I've put there as well about these extra staff helping in the delivery of our successful COVID vaccination programme, which has just been phenomenal. Next slide. So who are these extra staff? Well, in terms of the share of the people that we've employed, 55% of them are clinical pharmacists and pharmacy techs. So they will be helping the GPs with our regular patient discharge summaries, with medicines reviews, and things that can be done with a close eye of GP supervision, but will help with overall workload. 14% of that share of new staff, we've got care coordinators. Some of you may have already heard of those in role, but they are patients, supporting patients by signposting to services, by supporting them with hospital queries, and just generally being extra eyes and ears for those patients, where previously we had very little time to do that through the reception teams. We've got 3 new social prescribers, so that's 8% of this budget, and they are working across those mini 3 groups of 3 that I talked to you about earlier, and again supporting with specific kind of mental health signposting. And actually, you know, we are fairly well served in our area for groups and services. So the care coordinators or the social prescribers may even have the time to attend a new group with a patient who's feeling particularly nervous, so that not only they can support the patient, but so that they can experience that group for themselves and be able to recommend to other patients. We've got a first contact physio. So that's giving, you know, early MSK lower back pain advice to patients. And also we've still got 17% of that budget to be confirmed. So I'm in the throes of recruiting some nurse associates. That's a role that's between a healthcare assistant and a registered nurse. Some more care coordinators and perhaps some physicians associates, but we're having sort of strategic discussions about that with our current GP workforce. So next steps for the PCN is to hone and embed these plans to deliver some extra staff and make sure that they are comfortable and supporting patients in their new roles, and also how to increase that workforce in the future, because this NHS England funding actually increases year on year. So our capacity grows to make sure that we can recruit more staff. We're also concerned about practice estates. And obviously, as we recruit more staff, we need to make sure that practices can accommodate those people. So we're working with our commissioners to make sure that we can accommodate an expanding team. Thank you. So why did I particularly wanted to speak to you today was obviously to give you that summary of what we're doing. But, you know, things are tough at the moment. You know, we're concerned that primary care is already stretched and we're recovering from the pandemic. You know, we are doing our best. And I think actually within our wider group, patients have a better experience than they do in other parts of the country. So there's some comfort there, but there's always more to be done. And NHS England has reached out to general practice to ask them to provide some more hours to patients. So under a proposal called Enhanced Access, we're being asked to give an extra 60 minutes of appointments per 1,000 patients per week. So for us, for a patient population list size of 66,958, that's an extra 67 hours of clinical and support time across a week, which is actually a lot for us to do. So we have been thinking about how we can do that. We've got to produce a plan by the end of July. We've got to evidence that we've spoken to patients about the service. And we have a PCN patient forum, we've got patient participation groups across our patch, and obviously I'm speaking to you here tonight. And we've got to agree that plan before the end of August for rollout in October. So, you know, NHS England likes to make us work on projects like this. So we've got some ideas already. We think that within our current workforce and with the additional staff that I've just explained to you, we would be able to offer things like early morning appointments, particularly for working people, bloods, etc. A variety of evening or Saturday morning appointments. We are looking to develop an e-consultations platform. We recognise that many patients would value that service if they're working and they can just dial into a call. We've had feedback that would be appreciated, and also some more flexibility to the workforce that I've just mentioned to you. So the pharmacy team, physio, care coordinators, etc., perhaps during the early evening. We're thinking about things like group consultations for long-term conditions, chronic disease management like asthma and diabetes. So that could be where small groups of patients are invited to get together to understand their condition, to have an education session, but also, and importantly, I think, to give peer support where that makes sense. So that patients can manage their condition very well. And we're thinking that could be face-to-face sessions, that could be online, that could even be something that our patient forum might like to think about and design for us. We'd also like to give some improved access to women's health services, because we've had feedback that would be welcomed. So that's what we think we can do locally, so that's practice-based. And then some of you may have heard of our BAMES GP Federation, that's called BEMS, which is BAMES Enhanced Medical Service. So BEMS currently runs an improving access service for us, which is based at Elm Hayes Surgery in Poulton. And we're thinking, well, perhaps we could roll that out to 1 or 2 sites to increase accessibility. And that service could offer us some more evenings and some more Saturday mornings. But that's still work in progress at the moment. We are developing that plan. And also currently we have a home visiting paramedic in our patch. So that's a healthcare professional that can visit patients quickly through the morning or later on in the afternoon, where potentially that patient might be a case to be referred to hospital. So some early intervention there might really help. And obviously our GPs are still doing home visits and will continue to do so, but the extra paramedic situation is really helpful for GPs, and we want that to continue. So it's my responsibility to have a look at the budget to make sure that we can afford all of those things within our workforce plan. And I think it's safe to say that really what we do from October for 12 months will probably be, you know, a plan that recognises that we are recovering from the pandemic, and, you know, staff are already very exhausted with what we've had to cope with. So what we deliver in year 2 and beyond actually might be a bit more aspirational, and we could potentially commission new services to be delivered within our local community. So I know we haven't got a lot of time tonight, but I put my email address in the chat, and I would really welcome any views on our enhanced access plan. Be really lovely to hear from you.
Well, thank
you.
That was really interesting. We've got a couple of questions come through. I think Liz was the first one. So, to what
Thank you,
extent-
Liz. Yeah, I can see that in the chat. To what extent are we using physicians associates to replace doctors? Well, I too saw the Panorama programme this week. And I don't know whether that was the angle that Liz intended, but that's certainly a very different situation, isn't it? That's you know, a group that's owned by an American company. It's over 600,000 patients, and they are obviously using physicians associates to replace their GP workforce, or that's what Panorama was leading us to believe. That's obviously not what the situation is going to be here locally if we decide to go down that route. But the roles that I've listed to you, there is a set menu of people that we can recruit under this particular scheme, and physicians are one of them, and physicians associates are one of them. So through the universities that we tap into, Bath and Bristol, you know, there are some people that are interested in these fairly new roles, but obviously if we decide to go down that route, they will be under very close supervision with a GP. They do not replace the GP, but they can take some of the work, which sounds like good news. But, you know, I think that they will be in addition to rather than replacing, if that reassures.
It does, Helen. Thank you very much. I'm very reassured. Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you. And the other question we've got is from Lavinia. How will the system help those people who have long-term health conditions?
Hi there, Lavinia. So do you mean in terms of PCN working, or with the group consultations that I was talking about?
I think group consultations are one aspect of help for people with long-term health conditions, but quite often they are on their own, and quite often elderly and have no access to sort of modern media or modern social groups, and you know, would not have, particularly in this area, access to transport to get them there, or transport that's sufficiently supportive for them. And you know, I am concerned that over the years that we get a lot of people, and perhaps it's increased with things like long COVID as well, who are just parked, you know, and I do think that, you know, it's an area that we need to improve on.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with you there. I think this population health management programme that we have signed up to do, it's a pilot, you know, NHS England wants PCNs to work in this way in the future. And as I said in my presentation, to more proactively reach out. So the cohort that we've identified to be our first patients in this are younger patients that have long-term conditions, that have suffered with depression within the last 2 years, that have had 10 or more interactions with their GP, but without any, you know, proper outcome to all of this. So we want to really try and utilize our new workforce to really put our arms around these patients and really try and help. And we recognize the issues around transport links, and you know, I've got a team of practice managers around me that are very aware of local issues. So you know, I don't want to promise the earth, you know, that would be wrong too, but I think we're I feel on the edge of something new in the way that we start to manage patient need.
That's very hopeful. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Right, well, thank you very much to all of you. Really appreciate the time you've been here. And we have overrun about 15 minutes, but, oh, sorry, 10 minutes. But can we just quickly let you know that we are planning the next scheduled meeting to be on Wednesday, the 28th of September. And that will be the AGM. So if you can all just make a note. Okey-doke. And we look forward to seeing you then. So yes, thank you for coming out. It still looks nice out there, so put something in a glass and enjoy the rest of your evening. Okay, cheers then, bye.